The pen is already in her hand before she finishes reading clause 11.2. That is the thing nobody tells you about desperation. It does not arrive slowly. It does not give you time to think through the fine print, or consult someone wiser, or sleep on it the way sensible people sleep on decisions that will reorganize every remaining year of their life. Desperation arrives the way a power outage does one moment. Everything is running, and then it is not. And you are standing in the dark, holding whatever was in your hand when the lights went out. Nira Solis is holding a pen. The contract in front of her is 17 pages long. She has read all 17 pages twice, which means she has now read clause 9.4 4 times. No independent movement without prior authorization from the primary party. She has read clause 11.2 4 times. Violation of terms results in financial reversal of all accrued benefits, including active medical arrangements. She understands exactly what both clauses mean. She is a financial auditor. Understanding the architecture of a trap is her entire profession. She signs anyway. Hi, viewers. If someone handed you a contract that could save your mother's life but cost you your freedom, would you sign it without reading the last page? Comment your answer and where you're viewing from. Let's see how far Naira's story goes across the world. The ceremony happens 3 days later, in a room she will never be able to describe accurately because she spends the entire 11 minutes of it watching Kale Draven from her peripheral vision, trying to build a complete picture of him from pieces. He is tall in the way that reads less as height and more as a decision, as though his body chose its dimensions with the same calculation his face suggests he applies to everything else. Dark suit, no tie, a watch on his left wrist that costs more than the hospital bill that brought her to this room. He does not look at her during the vows. He looks at a fixed point on the wall behind the officiant, with the focused patience of someone waiting for an inefficient process to conclude. When it does, he turns to her. His eyes are a specific shade of brown that her brain files as the color of something very old and very certain of itself. He says 4 words in a voice calibrated exactly low enough that only she can hear them. Our marriage is just business. Then he turns away. She stands in her simple cream dress. Not a wedding dress, just a dress. Because this is not a wedding. It is a transaction. And watches his back as he crosses the room to speak to a man in a gray suit. And she thinks, he is right. It is business. She has executed business arrangements with worse terms than this. She has audited contracts with far darker implications drafted by men who smiled the entire time they were handing them over. What she does not think about, what she refuses to think about, because thinking about it would make the pen feel heavier than she can currently afford, is the moment 2 days ago when she sat across from her mother in the hospital room, and her mother reached across the bed rail and held her hand, and said, "You don't have to do anything on my account, baby," said it with a tremor in her voice that she was trying to hide, said it while hooked to a monitor that beeped every 4 seconds, with the specific rhythm of something that is working very hard to keep a person alive. Naira had squeezed her hand and said, "I know." She had already made the appointment with Kale Draven's attorney by then. What nobody in that room knows yet, what Naira herself will not fully understand until she is standing in his offshore estate on the 5th day, looking at a file that should not exist, with her own name at the bottom of a category she has never seen before, is that Kale Draven already knew her mother's surgeon's name before Naira told him. She did not notice that detail in the ceremony room. She notices it at 2 a.m., alone in the car back to her apartment, when the replay of the conversation runs through her head with the automatic precision of a mind that was built to catch the thing that does not add up. He said the surgeon's name first. She never told him the surgeon's name. The approval comes at 6:47 inches the morning, before Naira has finished her first cup of coffee, before she has changed out of the clothes she slept in, before she has done anything except sit at her kitchen table and stare at a wall and wonder whether she made the worst decision of her life or the only decision available to her. Her phone rings. A hospital administrator whose name she has been trying to reach for 6 weeks. The surgery is approved, fully funded. The surgical team is confirmed. Everything she has been fighting for through 4 months of calls and appeals and resubmissions and being placed on hold for 40 minutes only to be transferred back to the beginning. Resolved. Done. In the time it took her to sleep one night, under the terms of a contract she signed yesterday afternoon, she sets the phone down on the table. She picks up her coffee. She drinks it slowly and thinks, systems do not move this fast. She is a financial auditor. She has spent 6 years inside institutional systems, documenting the specific, grinding pace at which money moves when the person waiting for it does not have leverage. She knows the lag. She knows the review periods and the approval chains, and the way department heads sit on decisions for reasons that have nothing to do with the merits of the case. She knows all of this the way a mechanic knows the sound of an engine that is about to fail. This moved in 14 hours. She files that in the back of her mind, the way she files every anomaly quietly, precisely, in a place she will return to. The black car arrives at her building at 9. No driver introduction, no small talk. The drive takes 32 minutes, and she spends all 32 of them watching the city change texture outside the window, her neighborhood giving way to wider streets, then to the part of the city where the buildings stop apologizing for themselves. His office is on the 41st floor of a building that has no logo on the exterior. She notices that companies that do not need to advertise their location to the people who need to find them are companies that have decided the public is not their audience. He is at his desk when she enters. He does not look up immediately. He finishes the sentence he is writing. She can see from the doorway that it is handwritten, which is either habit or a deliberate choice about what gets documented digitally. And then he sets the pen down and looks at her with the specific attention of someone switching from one task to another, without losing the thread of either. She puts the folder on his desk. He looks at it. He does not touch it. My employment history, she says. My academic record. My mother's medical file going back 11 years. My prior addresses, including one I paid for in cash and never registered. She pauses. A photograph of me outside a courthouse on a day I told no one I was going. He is quiet. How long? She says. Longer than you'd be comfortable with. Before the contract. Yes. She keeps her voice level. She is good at keeping her voice level. It is one of the skills the job develops in you, the ability to deliver findings without the emotion that would compromise the credibility of the findings. You were already in my system before this, she says. That's what you told me. Yes. What system? He holds her gaze. Not with discomfort. With the specific steadiness of a man who has decided to give her the truth in portions sized for absorption. You'll know before the end of the month, he says. Some information is better understood in sequence. She wants to push. She wants to lay out every piece of the folder on his desk and demand a complete accounting, the way she would in any audit, full disclosure, full access, no managed narrative. She wants to tell him that she did not sign his contract to be managed. She does not say any of this, because something in the way he said, "You'll know," not "I'll tell you," but "you'll know," as though her understanding is already built into a sequence he has mapped, makes the air in the room feel different, denser, like pressure changing before weather arrives. She picks up the folder. "I'll hold you to that," she says. She is at the door when he speaks again. "You take your coffee with 2 sugars, he says, even though you buy unsweetened creamer. You hum the same 4 bars of an old Roberta Flack song when you're reading something that troubles you. You've done it 3 times since you walked in." She stops. She had not known she was humming. "The system," he says, very quietly, "is more detailed than the folder suggests." She walks out without responding, because the response forming in her chest is not one she is ready to give a man she married 14 hours ago. The helicopter banks leftover open water, and Naira sees the estate for the first time from the air, and her first thought is not about luxury or isolation or the specific category of wealth required to own something like this. Her first thought is operational. The perimeter is too clean. She has been on vacation properties before, seen aerial views of resorts and private islands in the course of financial audits tied to hospitality portfolios. They have a particular visual signature, irregular landscaping, recreational infrastructure, the casual sprawl of places designed for people to relax in. This estate has none of that. The grounds are precise, the paths are straight. The positioning of the outer structures relative to the main building follows a geometry that has nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with sightlines. She says nothing as the helicopter lands. She says nothing during the walk to the entrance, or during the brief introduction to the staff for visible, which means there are more she cannot see. She catalogs what she can: rotation pattern, positioning, the weight of movement in the security personnel that reads as trained rather than hired. Inside, dark polished floors that register footsteps at a very specific volume, surfaces that reflect, silence that costs money, not the silence of isolation, but the engineered silence of a building that has been constructed to contain sound rather than simply lack it. She knows the difference. Her room is in the east wing. His is in the west. There is a length of corridor and a shared dining space between them that feels, on the first evening, less like a floor plan and more like a policy. On the second evening, a woman named Leora brings dinner to her room on a heavy ceramic tray. Leora is perhaps 60, and she carries herself the way women carry themselves when they have been inside a particular world long enough to have seen its actual shape, not the shape it presents to visitors, but the shape underneath, the load-bearing structure. She sets the tray on the desk without ceremony and straightens and looks at Naira with the specific assessment of someone deciding how honest to be. "How are you finding it?" she asks. "Quiet," Naira says. "Controlled." Leora seems to approve of the precision. "Most people say beautiful." "It is," Naira says. "That's not what I said." Something shifts in Leora's expression, not surprise, more like recognition. She moves to the door, pauses with her hand on the frame. "Are you here because you want to be?" she asks, and her voice carries no judgment in either direction. "Or because you have to be?" "Is there a difference?" Naira says. "In a place like this?" Leora considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "There always is," she says. "He just doesn't always make it easy to see." She leaves. Naira eats. She does not taste the food. On the third morning, she begins her audit. She does not call it that. She does not use professional language even inside her own head, because professional language would require her to acknowledge what she is doing, which is applying her full skill set to the environment she is living inside, which is either reasonable caution or a violation of the implicit terms of the arrangement, and she has decided not to adjudicate that question until she has enough data. She maps the camera coverage first. There are 14 visible units across the main building and immediate grounds. She identifies 4 zones with no camera coverage, not blind spots created by accident, but deliberate gaps, which tells her that whoever designed the system wanted specific movement to be unrecorded. The staff rotation is 6-hour cycles, standard for security detail, not hospitality. She marks this. The communication system in the east corridor shows inbound monitoring on an outward-facing configuration. She reads this from the router panel the way most people read a street sign, automatically, without having to slow down for it. On the 4th morning, near the east corridor access panel, she finds the movement log. She almost walks past it. It is positioned below standard sightline, the display dark until she brushes the activation sensor with her hand reaching for the light switch. The screen illuminates, a rolling timestamp record. She reads it. Her name appears 41 times across 72 hours. She has been in the estate for exactly 72 hours. She has not been anywhere that she did not have explicit access permission to be. She is being tracked inside a tracking system that is running inside a security system, a record within a record, her movements cataloged with a specificity that goes beyond estate security protocol and into something that has a different name, a name she is not ready to say out loud yet. She takes a photograph of the screen with her phone. She tells herself she is just documenting. She tells herself that right up until the moment she opens the door to the study and sits down at the terminal and enters the reference code she found in an open file on the desk, a file that should not have been left open, that sits at the center of an anomaly too clean to be accidental, and the encrypted system opens. Just like that. No resistance. No access denial. No security prompt asking her to verify clearance she does not have. The system opens, and in the part of her brain that catalogs what does not match the part that has been running quietly since the helicopter, since the 14-hour approval, since the surgeon's name he said first, an alarm sounds that is not loud, but is very clear. A door left open is not an oversight. It is an invitation. The first thing she sees is the money. Not stacks, not physical currency. A financial architecture layered transactions across 6 jurisdictions, structured with the specific deliberateness of someone who understands exactly how pattern recognition algorithms work and has designed each layer to fall below the detection threshold of every one of them. She maps it automatically, the way her mind has always mapped financial structures, finding the nodes and the flow and the origin points without having to consciously instruct herself to look. It takes her 4 minutes to understand what she is looking at. It takes her 4 more to confirm she is right. This is not corporate evasion. This is not the standard offshore architecture she encounters 3 times a year in the portfolios of companies trying to reduce tax exposure. This has a purpose beyond money movement. The financial layer is infrastructure, a delivery system for something that operates underneath it. She goes deeper. The second layer has no currency amounts. It has names, full identity profiles, legal names, aliases, biometric markers, immigration status, employment records, last known physical locations. Each profile is tagged with a status: completed, in transit, pending. She scrolls through 17 profiles before she stops scrolling and forces herself to sit with what she is reading, because her first instinct, the auditor's instinct, the reflex that says, keep moving, keep mapping, understand the full structure before you react, is working against her right now. She is looking at people. Not transactions, people. Cataloged, categorized, tracked. She scrolls further. A secondary marker begins appearing on certain profiles. She reads it once. She reads it again. Voluntary extraction. And then, on the profiles without it, nothing. No qualifier. Just the status designation. Mandate. She sits with the word mandate for a long time. Then she types her own name into the search field. The profile loads in 3 seconds. It is thorough in a way that goes past invasive, and into a category she does not have a professional term for behavioral assessments, alongside the financial records. Risk modeling with variables she would not have known to include. A professional competence evaluation so accurate, it feels less like research, and more like documentation of someone who has been watching her work from a close enough distance to understand it. She scrolls to the bottom. Category: pending transition risk. Assessment: subject demonstrates elevated pattern recognition capability. System exposure probability: high. Cross-referencing behavior indicates proximity to restricted file architecture. Recommended protocol: monitor and contain. Decision deferred to primary party review. She closes the file. The room is very still. The estate's engineered silence wraps around her like something physical. Like the walls themselves are participating in a patience she is only beginning to understand. She is not a wife. She is a variable. She is a variable in a system that has not finished calculating what to do with her, documented under a category that sits between protected and something she does not want to name, and the only person with the authority to make that decision is a man she has been married to for 9 days and does not yet understand. She becomes aware of the footstep pattern 2 minutes before the door opens. She has memorized the sound the floorboard outside the study makes when weight is applied to it, a specific, low tone she identified on day 2, and for the last 2 minutes, no weight has been applied to it, which means whoever is in the hallway has memorized the board's position and is deliberately avoiding it. Only someone who moves through this space constantly knows where the boards are. She turns. Kale stands in the doorway. His eyes move to the terminal screen, dark now. She closed it before turning, and then to her face. He reads her the way he reads everything, with a stillness that takes in the complete picture before committing to a response. His expression does not change. He is not surprised. That is the detail that lands in her chest, like a weight finding the bottom. Not his presence. Not the fact that he has found her in his study with access to files she was not given clearance to open. The specific, total absence of surprise on his face. He already knew this moment was coming. He built it. The only question, the question that will determine whether she is in the most controlled danger she has ever been in, or something else entirely, is why. He does not call security. He does not reach for the terminal. He does not demand an explanation or perform the particular theater of a man who has caught someone where they should not be. He walks to the chair across from her, not behind the desk, not to a position of physical authority, but to the chair that places him at the same level, the same distance, the same arrangement as two people who are about to have a conversation. Neither of them has rehearsed. He sits. He rests his forearms on his knees. He looks at her the way he always looks at her, completely, with the attention of a man who processes everything and reveals only what he chooses. Then he begins to talk. The network has been running for 11 years, he says. It started as extraction individuals in documented danger from people and systems with no accountability. People who needed to disappear and had no legal mechanism to do so. A woman in federal witness protection whose handler was compromised. A journalist whose name had been flagged by 3 separate state actors simultaneously. A mother of 4 whose address had been sold by the officer who was supposed to be protecting her. He pauses. The work was necessary. And the mandate files, Naira says. He does not look away from her. I inherited contracts I would not have approved. Over time, people with resources identified the network as a tool. They used it to remove individuals who were not in danger, individuals who were simply inconvenient, witnesses, auditors. The word lands in the room with a specific weight. People whose professional work was going to cost the wrong people too much. And you continued running the network while this was happening. I identified the corruption 3 years ago. I have been dismantling it from the inside, removing the mandate contracts one at a time, in a sequence that does not collapse the voluntary infrastructure, because if the infrastructure collapses, the people who need the door do not have it anymore. She looks at him. That is a very organized way of describing something that has been erasing people without their consent. Yes, he says. It is. The honesty of it stops her. She had prepared for management for the controlled narrative, the strategic partial disclosure, the version of truth designed to redirect rather than inform. She had not prepared for the flat acknowledgement of a man who has already judged himself and is not asking her to revise that judgment. The confession, she says slowly, is what, exactly? That you run a system that started with good intentions and became something else. The confession, he says, is that I found you 18 months before the contract. The room shifts, not physically. In the specific way a room shifts when the information inside it changes the weight of everything else. Your audit work had crossed the network's financial structure twice, once in 2023, once 8 months later. You were tracing threads without knowing what they connected to. You were 3 connections away from the mandate architecture. He holds her gaze. I flagged you as a risk. I initiated monitoring, and the contract was a controlled environment to assess the nature of the risk. She stands, not from anger. Anger is a reaction she cannot afford right now, because anger narrows the field, and she needs the full field, every detail, every implication, every angle of what she is hearing mapped against every detail she has been cataloging since the helicopter. She stands because the room is too small for what he is telling her, and she needs to feel the floor under her feet to keep her thinking clear. You married me, she says, to determine whether I was a liability. I married you, he says, because the assessment produced a result I did not expect. She waits. You were the only person in 6 years who came close to finding the network without assistance, without mandate, and without being compensated to look. He pauses. I needed to understand what drove that. And do you? Not entirely. She crosses to the window. The sea beyond the estate's perimeter is dark and wide, and entirely indifferent to the conversation happening in this room. She stands with her back to him for a moment, Not for drama, but because she needs 3 seconds without his eyes on her to locate the part of herself that is still a professional, still analytical, still capable of examining this situation without the noise of everything it means personally. She finds it. She turns back. "Am I being protected?" she says, "or prepared?" The question sits in the air between them. He does not answer immediately. He looks at her with something that occupies the space between calculation and something raw, something she would not have expected to see on the face of a man whose entire architecture is built on control. "I'm not certain," he says finally. That distinction is as clear as it was 11 days ago. She holds his gaze. "That," she says quietly, "is either the most honest thing you have said to me or the most dangerous." "Yes," he says. "Which one?" He looks at her for a long moment. The estate's silence holds them both inside it, like something cupped in 2 hands. "Come back tomorrow," he says. "I'll show you the rest of the files." It is not an answer. But the fact that he said tomorrow, the fact that he is planning a tomorrow in which she is still here, still inside this house, still a person he is choosing to show things to, rather than from, tells her something that the mandate file and the access logs and the 14-hour approval and the surgeon's name did not. She is not a liability he is managing. She is a problem he has decided he does not want to solve by removing. What she does not know yet what will land on her in the 16th hour of the next day, with the force of something she should have seen coming, is that someone outside this estate has already made a different calculation, and that calculation has a name. And that name has been watching the estate's registration documents, with the patience of a man who has been building a case for 2 years, waiting for exactly the kind of variable Naira Solis represents, a variable he can use. The door to the study is still open behind Kale. The hallway beyond it is dark. In the dark, a light on the security panel blinks twice. The specific pattern she learned on day 3 means an external communication attempt has been logged and automatically blocked. Someone is trying to reach the estate from outside. They have been trying for the last 4 hours. The phone lands on the table between them at 6 a.m., and Naira stares at it the way you stare at something that should not exist in the context you are standing inside. It is unlocked, active, full signal. For 16 days, she has been living inside a communication blackout so complete, she stopped checking her own phone by day 4. Not because she forgot about the outside world, but because the checking had become a reminder of a door that was not there. And now the door is standing open, and the man who built the walls around it is sitting across from her, with his hands flat on the table, watching her look at it. "The boat leaves at 6 tomorrow morning," Kale says. "No consequences. Your mother's treatment stays funded. The contract dissolves as of this conversation. You walk back into your life and none of this follows you." She does not reach for the phone. "Why?" she says. "Because keeping you here under terms you did not fully understand when you signed them is not something I'm willing to continue." She looks at him. That's not an answer. That's a policy statement. Something moves in his expression, the specific compression of a man who is prepared for a conversation and found that the person across from him is not following the path he mapped. "You are not what I assessed you to be," he says. "The evaluation is complete. The result requires a different response than containment, which is your choice." She stands. She walks to the window because she needs to move, and the room is too small for the size of what is happening inside her chest right now. Outside, the sea catches the early light in a way that would be beautiful if she were a person who had the bandwidth for beautiful right now, which she does not. Here is what she knows. She knows the voluntary network still has active cases, individuals in genuine danger, whose extractions are mid-process, whose safety depends on the infrastructure continuing to function. She knows the mandate contracts are still live, that 3 of them have financial trail signatures she has already mapped enough of to dismantle if she has another 2 weeks, and continued access. She knows that the man sitting at that table has been trying to correct the worst of what his operation became, and that the correction has been slow because he has been doing it alone. She also knows, and this is the part she cannot make professional, cannot audit, cannot reduce to a finding or a recommendation, that she has not felt this seen by another person in a very long time. Not because of the surveillance, not because he knows how she takes her coffee and what song she hums when she is reading something that troubles her. Those things are data. Data is not the same as being seen. She feels seen because he is sitting at that table offering her a door he built himself, and his hands are flat and still, and he is not trying to make staying feel better than it is, or make leaving feel worse. He is just giving her the choice the way he stated his terms at the ceremony, flat, direct, no performance. She turns from the window. "If I stay," she says, "the mandate contracts come down. All of them. Not on your timeline. On mine." He does not hesitate. "Agreed. I want full access to the financial architecture. No managed disclosure. Everything." "Yes. And I work as an independent contractor with my own credentials attached. If this ever surfaces, my name is not buried inside yours. That's the smarter structure anyway," he says. She looks at him for a long moment. "I'll stay," she says. The room is very quiet. He looks at her with an expression she will think about later, the specific expression of a man encountering an outcome he calculated the probability of and assigned a low number to, and finding that the low number was wrong. Not relief, not triumph, something quieter than either. "I didn't expect that," he says. "I know," she says. "That's why I said it first." She picks up the phone and sets it on the desk beside her laptop. She has work to do. What neither of them knows yet, what is already in motion 400 miles away. In an office that monitors financial systems the way Naira monitors transactions. Looking for exactly the pattern she has been mapping from the inside is that her decision to stay has just made her the most significant active variable in a case that has been building for 2 years. And the man running that case does not intend to wait much longer. The perimeter lights go full active at 3:14 a.m., and Naira is already awake. She has been awake since 1 a.m., cross-referencing the third mandate file against the holding company structure she cracked 2 days ago, and when the illumination shift hits the edges of her window, she recognizes it in under 2 seconds, not the standard passive glow of the estate's overnight configuration, but the sharp, total activation of threat protocol. She knows the difference, because she memorized the standard pattern on day 3, the same way she memorized everything else about this environment that most people would have looked at and called beautiful. She is in the corridor in 30 seconds. KL is already at the intersection from the west wing, fully dressed, jacket on, the specific readiness of a man who does not sleep deeply in his own house, the way people sleep when they feel safe. He sleeps the way people sleep when they are always half listening. His eyes find her immediately. "East corridor," he says. "Third room. Lock it from the inside." "What is it?" "The Mercer Syndicate. They found the estate registration." She does not move toward the east corridor. Her mind is already running the connection. Because she built the map, she has the architecture, she knows exactly where the estate registration sits, inside the holding company structure. "They found it through the mandate financial layer," she says. "The registration has a holding company tie that links directly to 3 of the transaction codes I flagged. Anyone auditing the mandate network from outside would hit that registration as a visible thread." He stops moving. He looks at her. "East corridor," he says again. "Third room. Kale. Naira." Her full name. The specific weight he gives it in moments when everything else has been stripped away. "I will come for you. Lock the door." She goes. The third room in the east corridor is small and has one window that faces the interior courtyard rather than the perimeter, which means she cannot see what is happening, but she can hear the architecture of it, the organized, sequential sound of a security response that has been rehearsed so many times it has no wasted motion, no shouting, no chaos. The controlled percussion of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. She sits on the edge of the bed in the dark and counts the sounds the way she counts everything. 22 minutes. Then silence. Then his footsteps in the corridor. She knows the specific rhythm of them. The particular pace that means he is moving towards something rather than away from it, which means whatever was happening outside is finished. The door opens. His jacket is gone. He is not injured in any visible way, but he carries himself with the particular economy of someone who has just applied significant force and is bringing it back under control. He stands in the doorway and looks at her with an expression that takes inventory. 3 men, he says, sent by Marcus Mercer. He has been building a case against the network for 2 years, not to dismantle it, to own it. He wants to acquire the infrastructure. He wants the mandate contract specifically. The voluntary network is not what interests him. What interests him is a list of people who have been erased. People who can be threatened, leveraged, or re-exposed, depending on what he needs from them. Naira feels the shape of that land in her chest with a cold, specific weight. The mandate files I've been mapping, she says. If he acquires them, every name in them becomes his leverage. There was someone inside, she says. Not a question. She has already calculated it. The estate registration was buried under 3 holding company layers. Finding it required either extraordinary external resources or someone on the inside who knew where to look. Kale is quiet for a moment. He has been handled. She looks at him carefully. Handled. He is no longer on the estate. She makes the professional decision not to ask for a more specific definition of that statement. Some answers, she has learned in 19 days inside this world, are better understood as closed doors than open ones. Mercer knows I'm here, she says. He knows what I found. Yes, which means he knows that someone with my audit capability has been inside the network architecture. He knows I can map the mandate files. If he's trying to acquire the network, I am the single biggest risk to his timeline. Yes, so I'm not just a variable in your system anymore. She holds his gaze. I'm a target in his. He does not soften it. Yes, she absorbs this without moving, without changing her expression, without giving the fear that is running through her chest any external surface to be read from. Because that is the thing she knows about herself that no surveillance file captured, that no behavioral assessment quantified. She does not go quiet when she is afraid. She goes precise. Then we need to finish dismantling the mandate files faster than he can build his acquisition case. Kale looks at her with the specific attention she has learned to read as the closest thing he has to open admiration. I'll have full access to you by 6 a.m., he says. She almost corrects him on the phrasing. She does not. Because there is something in the way he said it, full access to you instead of full access for you. The specific small slip of a man whose language is revealing something his control has not approved, that she is going to think about for a long time. 6 a.m., she says. She goes back to the desk. She does not sleep. He tells her about his mother on the 19th day, and he does not warn her that he is going to. It happens in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. In the specific way, honest things happen between people who have stopped performing for each other. Not because the moment was planned, but because the accumulation of days finally tips the container and something spills. Leora has left coffee on the counter and made herself absent with the discretion of someone who has watched this man for years and knows when the room needs fewer people in it. Kale is at the window. Naira is sitting on the counter edge with her second cup, reading back through her notes on the Mercer acquisition timeline, when he begins talking in the quiet, factual voice he uses for things he has decided to say only once. Her name was Desiree, he says. She was an investigative journalist. She spent 3 years documenting a state-level financial operation, a system that was removing inconvenient people from official records. Witnesses, individuals who had documented things that certain people needed them to have never documented. Naira sets her notes down. She was good at it, he says. The same way you are good at it, not because someone trained her, but because her mind moved in that direction naturally. She found the threads, and she followed them without knowing where they ended. What happened? Naira says. She brought her documentation to a man she trusted, a senior editor with 30 years in the industry, a man she had worked with since the beginning of her career. He pauses. He was embedded in the network she was exposing. The kitchen is very still. She was erased, he says. Not killed. Extracted her documentation discredited. Her credentials revoked. A new identity built for her in a country where the language barrier alone would make her work impossible to publish. She did not know it was coming. She did not have a door. How old were you? Naira says. 17, he says. Old enough to understand what happened. Not old enough yet to do anything about it. You built the network, she says slowly, because she didn't have one. I built it because she needed a door, and there was no door. And then I spent 11 years building the infrastructure. And somewhere in the building of it, the wrong people found the door and began using it for purposes I did not design it for. He turns from the window. By the time I identified the corruption, the mandate contracts were embedded deep enough that removing them aggressively would have collapsed the voluntary system. People who genuinely needed extraction would have lost access. So you started from the inside, 3 years ago, slowly, one contract at a time. She looks at him, really looks at him, the way she has been careful not to look at him until now, because looking at a person that directly is an act of exposure that goes in both directions. She looks at the line of his jaw and the stillness he carries, and the specific weight behind his eyes that she has been cataloging since the ceremony, without knowing exactly what it was the weight of. She knows now. He is carrying 19 years of a correction he started too late. She died 4 months after I found her, he says. She never wrote again. Naira does not say she is sorry. Sorry is a word people use when they have nothing more accurate available, and she has something more accurate. You found me, she says, doing the same thing she was doing, following threads without knowing where they ended. And you flagged me as a risk. Yes, because the last person who found those threads without knowing where they ended didn't have a door, he says, and I didn't build one in time. The understanding settles over her like pressure equalizing, not comfortable, not uncomfortable, just accurate. The contract, the controlled environment, the marriage, the 16 days of monitoring and assessment and managed disclosure. Not a trap, not purely a trap. An overbuilt, imperfect, ethically complicated door, built by a man who watched the absence of one destroy the person he could not protect. She slides off the counter. She crosses the kitchen and stands beside him at the window, and they both look out at the sea, which is doing what it always does, moving without asking anyone's permission, indifferent to the weight of the room behind the glass. I understand you, she says. He turns. She holds his gaze. That's not absolution. The mandate contracts still come down. The people in those files still get a choice about their own futures. That doesn't change. I know, he says, but I understand you. He looks at her with something that does not have a name in any professional vocabulary she has ever used. Something that lives below strategy and below calculation and below the particular armor a man builds when he has been operating in the dark for 2 decades. That, he says, very quietly, is the thing I was least prepared for. She turns back to the window. Outside, the light is changing the specific shift from the gray of early morning into the first clear warmth of a day that has not decided yet what it is going to be. She watches it and thinks about Desiree, about a woman with a good mind and a following instinct, and a door that was not there when she needed it. She thinks about her own name at the bottom of a pending transition file. She thinks about the man standing 12 inches to her left, who built an entire infrastructure around a ghost he could not save, and then spent 19 days deciding whether she was the same risk or something else entirely. What she does not yet know what is moving through a financial system 400 miles away with the specific, quiet velocity of a structure designed to look like legitimate regulatory action until it is too close to stop, is that Marcus Mercer has stopped waiting. He filed the trigger mechanism at midnight. Naira will find it in 11 hours. She finds it at 7 a.m., and her stomach drops the way it drops when you identify a structure you have seen before, not because you have audited this exact case, but because you have audited the architecture, and the architecture is unmistakable. The way a particular kind of fraud is always unmistakable, once you have seen it built the first time. It's a mirror structure, she says. Cale is beside her at the terminal in under a minute. She does not wait for him to read it at his own pace. She maps it out loud the way she does in professional briefings, fast, sequential, No wasted words. Mercer built a parallel documentation trail that mimics the network's own filing logic. When the regulatory review pulls the network's transaction records, which they will do, because he triggered a multi-jurisdiction audit flag at midnight, his manufactured trail surfaces simultaneously. It looks like corroborating evidence. It's designed to make the mandate contracts appear to be the network's primary function, rather than a corruption of it, which reframes the entire network, Cale says, as a criminal enterprise operating under the voluntary extraction cover. Every case in the voluntary files gets contaminated by association. Every individual the network helped becomes a potential witness in a criminal proceeding. She pauses, and Mercer positions himself as the whistleblower, the man who exposed it, which gives him leverage over everyone in the files and a legal argument for access to the network's infrastructure as evidence custodian. The room is tight with the specific silence of two people understanding the same thing at the same moment. "Can you dismantle it?" he says. "I can expose it." The manufacturing process has a signature. There are points where his trail deviates from authentic financial record structure, places where the timestamp logic does not match the transaction sequence. "I can document every deviation. I can build a submission that proves the trail is fabricated." She turns to face him. "But I cannot submit it as Naira Draven." He goes very still. "If I submit as your wife, it is inadmissible. It reads as spousal protection, a defense filing, not an independent audit." She holds his eyes. "I have to submit as Naira Solace, independent contractor, no affiliation with the Draven corporate structure or any associated entity." "Which means the contract dissolves," he says. "Which means the contract dissolves." He does not move. He does not look away from her. She watches something move through his expression, compressed, controlled, but visible to her now in a way it would not have been on day one, because 19 days inside a person's orbit teaches you the geography of their face, whether you intend to learn it or not. He is calculating, but underneath the calculation, beneath the architecture of a man who has built his entire existence on knowing the next move before he commits to the current one, she sees something she was not expecting. He does not want to let go of the contract. Not for leverage, not for control. He does not want to let go of it, because the contract is the last official structure, keeping her inside this world. And he is a man who understands exactly what it means when the last structure comes down. "Cale," she says. "How long do you need?" he says. 4 hours. He makes 3 calls. The calls take 11 minutes. When the last one ends, his security director has received the authorization, her original credentials, her professional certification, her independent auditor registration, all transferred back to the name she was born with. "The contract is dissolved," he says. "As of this moment." She is already working. 4 hours and 9 minutes later, at 11:47 a.m., Naira Solace, independent certified financial auditor, no corporate affiliation, no spousal connection to any entity under regulatory review, submits a 43-page deviation analysis to the Multi-Jurisdiction Audit Board. The documentation is precise in the way that only someone who built their own map of the network's authentic architecture could make it precise. She does not argue that Mercer's trail is fraudulent. She demonstrates it, point by point, deviation by deviation, timestamp by timestamp, with the specific, unsentimental certainty of a woman who has been reading financial structures her entire career and has never once needed to raise her voice to be heard. By 2 p.m., Mercer's manufactured trail is flagged for forensic review. By 4 p.m., the regulatory investigation reverses direction. By 5:47 p.m., the audit flag that Mercer triggered at midnight is now pointed at him. Cale finds her at the window when it is over. She is watching the sea, the same sea she has been watching for 23 days, the same water moving the same way it always has, indifferent and wide and older than every system either of them has ever tried to map. "His architecture is collapsing," she says. "Yes, he built it to be fast. Fast structures are not built for pressure. They look strong until someone applies the right force at the right point." "You found the right point," he says. She turns. He is standing in the middle of the room, not at his desk, not by the door, just standing, which is unusual for him, because Cale Draven is a man who positions himself with intention, and standing in the middle of a room with no obvious function is the closest thing to unguarded she has ever seen him be. The contract is dissolved, she says. Yes, I'm here because I'm choosing to be. He looks at her. I know. I want to make sure you know. Nira, he says. And the way he says her name, not as punctuation, not as gravity, but as the entirety of what he is trying to say, lands in the center of her chest and stays there. I know. Outside, the sea keeps moving. Inside the estate, something that was once a controlled environment is becoming, gradually and with no formal announcement, something that requires a different word. What comes next is not an ending. It is an opening. 8 months later, the last mandate contract closes, and Nira marks it the same way she has marked everyone before it. Not with celebration, not with a formal announcement, just a line through the case number in the master file she has been maintaining since month 2, the file that started with 31 open entries and now has 31 clean lines running through them. 31 people who were in someone else's system without their consent. 31 people who now have their own name back, their own choice, their own door open or closed. That is theirs to decide. She closes the file. She saves it in a folder labeled Completed Final. And she sits back in the chair that used to be a visitor's chair in a study she was not supposed to be in. And she lets the weight of it settle. Her mother calls at 9 a.m., the way she calls every Tuesday, and her voice has the specific quality it has had for 6 months now, the quality of a woman who has been given more time and has decided to use it fully. She asks about the weather. She asks about Leora's daughter, whose college applications Nira helped edit in January. She asks, in the careful way she has asked every Tuesday, whether Nira is happy. Nira tells her yes. She means it. The voluntary network is still running, smaller now, restructured to its original function, stripped of every component that was ever used for anything other than what it was designed for. 14 active cases at any given time, maximum. Every case reviewed by 2 independent parties before intake, one of whom is Nira, operating under her own credentials, her own professional standing, her own name. If it ever surfaces, and she knows the probability is not 0, her record will show exactly what she did and why. There will be no question of coercion. There will be no question of spousal complicity. There will be a 43-page deviation analysis that reversed a fraudulent regulatory investigation, a master file of 31 closed mandate contracts, each with full restoration documentation, and the professional record of a woman who found a broken system and chose to fix it rather than report it from a safe distance. She is at peace with that. Marcus Mercer's trial completes in month 6. Financial fraud, evidence manipulation, attempted acquisition of an illegal network for personal leverage purposes. The conviction is public record. The sentencing is covered in 3 national outlets, which is exactly one more outlet than covered the audit report that cost 3 city officials their positions 2 years ago. She reads the coverage once and does not read it again. Cale finds her on the East Terrace on the morning the last file closes. He does not ask how she is. He brings 2 cups of coffee, 2 sugars in hers, which he has never once needed to be told, and sets them on the low table between the chairs and sits down without ceremony, the way 2 people sit down in a space they have shared long enough that the sitting itself no longer requires any announcement. The sea is doing what it always does. 31, she says. Yes, all closed. All closed. She picks up her coffee. The network needs a new intake protocol. The current review process has a lag in the documentation chain between initial contact and case assignment. I mapped 3 instances in the last quarter where the lag created a window. I saw your notes. I want to redesign the intake architecture. I know, he says. I've already told the team you're leading it. She looks at him. He is watching the sea with the specific stillness she has known for 8 months. The stillness that once read as control, and now reads as the particular piece of a man who has stopped fighting the thing he is most afraid of, losing. The contract dissolved 8 months ago, she says. Yes, I'm still here. I'm aware, he says. Say it differently. He turns to look at her. The early light catches his face at the angle she has come to know. The way she knows the sound of his footsteps, and the specific silence before he says something that matters. An angle that makes him look less like the man in The Friend, black car outside a hospital billing office, and more like what he actually is. A person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and has, very slowly, in the company of someone he did not plan for, started to set it down. This, he says, was never just business. The words land exactly where she needed them to land. She turns back to the sea. The coffee is warm in her hands. Somewhere in the main building, she can hear Leora giving directions to the morning staff in her particular no-argument tone. The sound of a household that is operational and alive, and has been since before either of them arrived in it. No, Naira says. It wasn't. She is not the woman who sat in a kitchen at 11 at night reading a 17-page contract with a pen already in her hand. She is not the variable in a pending transition file. Not the liability that needed to be assessed. Not the risk that needed to be contained. She is Naira Solace, her name, her credentials, her record, her work, her choice to stay when the door was open, and her choice to build something in the staying. She did not need to be rescued. She needed a door at the right moment, and the discernment to walk through it on her own terms. The sea keeps moving. The morning holds. The work continues. And somewhere in the main building, her laptop is open to the intake architecture redesign, waiting for the woman who is going to make the system better than she found it. She finishes her coffee. She goes back inside. If this story moved something in you, if Naira's quiet courage, her refusal to be reduced to a category in someone else's file, her choice to stay and build rather than run, if any of that landed somewhere real, then this channel is exactly where you belong. Every story here is built for the person who has been underestimated, overlooked, or told their value was conditional. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one, because the next story is already coming, and it is not one you want to walk into halfway through. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done in Naira's position. Tell us the moment you knew she was going to be okay. Your words in the comments do not just reach us. They reach every person scrolling through who needed to see someone else say out loud what they have been carrying quietly. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose door you open when you do.